Welcome everyone to the latest in VMA's digital series. My name's Joel Edmondson. I'm the CEO of the Venue Management Association. Joining us today in our session is Steve Mackenzie, CVE from Momentus Technologies, who are the VMA's innovation partner under their association sponsorship. Steve is also joined today by Dwane Goodman, Chief Operating Officer from the Gema Group. Steve and Dwane will delve into the topic of technological disruption and its impact on our industry, and explore whether technology is ultimately a friend or foe or neither. Welcome to Steve and Dwane today. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping business before we continue and then hand over to the guys for what will be a fascinating discussion. As many of you would know, the VMA for the last 32 years has been running a venue management school every November. This is really the premier moment in the VMA calendar for people at all levels of our industry to come together and to learn from each other. It's a bit of a rite of passage for people in our industry, both at the venue management school level and at the Leadership Institute level. Currently, we're pretty close to selling out seats for the school this year. Year two is certainly almost completely subscribed as Leadership Institute, and that says a lot about what previous people who've attended these events before feel about the experience of attending them and the impact that it has in their careers. So please pop to the VMA website, vma.org.au, to sign up. Feel free to put maximum pressure on your employer to support you to attend, because for them it's professional development of their staff is a really good outcome for the venue and for you personally. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Steve and Dwane to introduce themselves. They'll speak for about 45 minutes, and then I will moderate some questions from you. So there is an opportunity to ask questions during in the little Q&A box here, and I'll review those and then run through some of those as we go through. But thank you to Dwane and Steve.
Thanks very much, Joel. Pleasure to be here. As many of you may know, this is a favourite topic of mine to talk about, technology and disruption. And I thought, who better to also bring in on this panel than Dwane, who's also very much at the leading edge of a lot of this sort of stuff and has some good, strong opinions on some of these things too. So whilst we might not always give you the answers or the things you want to hear, we're going to give you our opinions at least, and take those for what they are. They're our opinions, and certainly open for more discussion. So as Joel said, feel free to use that Q&A as we go through this. Great to see all that participant number going up and up as we're talking here. So let me first of all just share the screen here, so that we can get going. All right, and the first thing I want to talk about is when we talk about disruption to the industry. You know, I'm a bit older than maybe some people here, but I vividly remember when a major disruption happened to our industry, and that was the advent of the smartphone when that came in. I remember going to many conferences pre-smartphone days, or just when they first came out, and the first thing that the people said at the events was, please turn off your phones, put your phones away, they're a distraction. You can't be using those. You've got to focus. The speakers are saying you can't use the cameras on your smartphones to take photos of the event you're at, etc. etc. Well, guess what? We got disrupted, right? We couldn't keep that line going because it became very apparent that smartphones were very much a part of everybody's everyday life, and they wanted to use those mediums to share what they're experiencing when they came to our events. So that was a good example, I think, of us thinking as an industry that, well, this is a technology that we see as a disruption to it and something we shouldn't be doing, when in actual fact, now we encourage people to bring their phones out to take photos, to share on their socials, to to give people FOMO for not being there, and all these good things. So this is a perfect example of where disruption comes into play, and we've got to be really mindful and have an open mind when it comes to that. Obviously, most of the shows these days let you, and events you go to, let you take photos and video, with the exception of some of the comedy shows, of course, because they don't want you to ruin their Netflix specials that are coming out. But keep that in mind as a good example as we talk about some of these newer technologies going through this. The first one I want to touch on is the metaverse. We all hear this word and we say, well, what is the metaverse, and what does that mean to us? What does that mean to me as a venue manager? Well, it's like a lot of this stuff. It can mean different things to different people. But to try to bring it back to how it relates to us in the industry, think of the metaverse as like a confluence or a coming together of the real world and the artificial world. So a good example of that would be if you've ever played the game Pokemon Go. On your phone, you've got you look on your phone, you've got a map that's showing you a real-time street view of a real street as you're walking along. But then there's all these computer-generated animations that come out of it, the CGI stuff, where you're seeing Pokemons and capturing them or whatever you do. I've never actually played it myself, but my son's an avid fan. So there's this coming together of these two worlds, the real world and the artificial world. And we see that, we just come off the back of the Olympics. So we see that a lot at the Olympics when you're watching the swimming and you see the graphics superimposed over the pool. You see it every day or every weekend, or when you're watching a sporting event, whatever your favorite code is, there's all the stats overlaid and everything else. So there's some really, really cool examples that are happening in the industry. And I just talked about the Paris Olympics. This is actually an example of where a digital twin was done of in this case, the volleyball stadium that was just outside of the Eiffel Tower. But they commissioned a company to do a digital twin so they could do all sorts of modeling pre-event, everything from security. So being able to have this real accurate to scale model. So if there was, they could do, if there was a bomb blast, for example, what was the bomb radius going to be? This sort of stuff that would, give them an idea of how they could control things. And there's a lot of this digital twinning going on as different venues are now looking at doing different things, from even pre-builds, having a digital twin of the venue that you can actually have people walk through without coming there, and all those sort of things. By the way, some of the things we're going to do today may come from certain suppliers. We're certainly not endorsing anybody, just using some good examples of some of the technologies that are in these different areas. Another example of metaverse and augmented reality, which is another way of looking at it, is this idea of virtual tours. So whether you're a convention center, stadium, theater, arena, doesn't matter. There's a lot of people now starting to invest in these virtual tours. So people can see what the venue is going to look like without having to actually be there, or even if they're at the venue, being able to look like through this, in this case, an iPad, look through that and be able to flick between different setups and see how this room's set up for a concert, how this room's set up for a banquet, how this room's set up for all different scenarios and different event types. So these sort of things are, very much in play now at many, many different types of venues. And some of us may say, well, this is counterintuitive. I want people to come to the venue to experience it. And that's fine. I'm a firm believer that you can't beat the face-to-face. However, there's an awful lot of people that also are very time poor and want to be able to do all this research without being at the venue. So we have to, again, embrace these things if we don't want to be disrupted by something being totally virtual. Dwane, have you got any thoughts on that?
I think it actually plays, it's quite helpful when we start talking investment and capital spend on particular spaces. And I mean, when we used to fit an area out or we'd change a space in a venue, you'd come up with a concept, someone might do a CAD drawing, there might be a slight render, and then, a capital budget might be approved. But we all know the reality of budgeting, that for every, 10 ideas, you might only get one through. If you've got some augmented reality where you can walk through the board, your investment group, that this is what is going to come to life, this is how it's going to look, this is how it's going to feel, it tells a little bit more of a story, because these investments are so big these days. We're not talking, an outlet change for 50 grand of signage. It's more, removing walls and putting in new technology and interfaces, and you might be spending, $500,000 or $1 million on a fit out. And you've really got to make sure that everybody that's funding that is on the journey with you. So some of these technology pieces allow from a consumer to see the space and how they might use it, but also when we're pitching internally or thinking about bringing something to life, it gives us a real good look and feel and the ability to understand the space and how it might work before we actually go and pull the trigger on the big investment.
Yeah, a perfect example, Zen. And I think, what you're highlighting there is showing that this is actually a friend, not a foe, when it comes to how we're thinking about doing business and as we evolve our businesses, for sure. Just sort of leading on from that, I still get PTSD looking at pictures like this where, back in and I don't want to talk about the C word and what happened a few years ago. We've all beaten that to death and we don't want to relive it. But Zoom fatigue is a real thing, right? And so we all thought, and many of us thought, and especially in the tech world, that virtual was going to take over. We thought, wow, virtual was never really a thing, but now that we're forced to actually do it, all these companies come out of the woodwork, and there was a lot of money being thrown at virtual events and virtual event companies. And guess what? As we all know, as soon as we could get back together face to face, virtual has become almost non-existent. Now, I don't want to be predicting that it would never be something. What I think we learnt from living this was the fact that if you're going to do something virtual, it has to be almost television quality production to be worthwhile and to make people want to come to an event if it's going to be virtual. Don't just try to do it as a Zoom call and figure that people are going to love that, because people are sitting at their desks. We've got a very short attention span. We're going to be doing our emails. We're going to be doing all those other things. So unless you can do a super engaging virtual event, it's typically not going to be as engaging as you are when you're face to face. And so I think what we're going to see, I think we're still in a bit of a bubble at the moment. We've come a couple of years now, or 3 years back into being able to see each other again, and I think everyone's like, yay, this is great. What I think, and so we don't care about it virtual at all, but what I think is going to happen is you'll see a combination of hybrid events where you're going to see where it'll be a live event and there'll be a virtual component to it, or a hybrid component where people who won't be able to get there ordinarily would still be able to attend. But again, quality of that's got to be excellent. Otherwise, you're not going to engage those people near as much. We used to see a lot of this, right, where it was just coming out of or coming back together, where there'd be some people presenting in person and some people presenting remotely. We're not seeing as much of that anymore as we did. And again, because I think people just love that face to face and being able to be engaged. I heard a tech speaker the other day actually say, if I'm live, I don't want to be seeing a Zoom call. So you don't bring people in on Zoom if you're going to be live. It just doesn't have the same impact. Switching gears totally though, away from the whole idea of virtual events now, and let's sort of get into a little bit more of the domain that Dwane works in with the Gema Group, and talking about some of the things we're seeing in the food and beverage areas and the catering side. Everybody by now has heard about the Just Walk Out technology by Amazon. There's a few different iterations of this around the traps, he's doing different things, but Amazon seem to be the one that's on everybody's lips. Dwane, do you want to just talk us through some of this and how it works and the pros and cons?
Yeah, of course. As Steve said, it's popping up everywhere, and if you're not talking about having one of these outlets in your venue, you're probably going to get left behind at some stage. There's still discussion going on as to at what iteration, how much, when, where, and what the appropriateness of these outlets are. There's some venues that have just launched or opened that are fully frictionless technology with no interaction at the point of sale piece. And then there's others that are only doing one or two outlets in each. and it's probably somewhere in the middle. The way this technology works is it essentially, you tap your credit card on the way in. There's a camera system in the roof that recognizes you as an individual. It turns you into an AI bot or a sort of a square that's marked with an ID code that triggers to your credit card. And then whatever you take off the shelf or put back on the shelf, it calculates, and then you just walk out and it charges you accordingly. It has a very, very high accuracy rate. There are some safeguards in place, but it does come with significant costs in the get-go. You have to have the right outlet, the right area, the right roof height, and the flow has to be in a way where you can't automatically change things if one of your food and beverage staff members or a staff member puts the wrong product on the wrong shelf location. It doesn't recognize the product per se. It recognizes the location of where that product's coming off the shelf. So if somebody put a $2 Mars bar on the shelf where a $10 bag of chips came from, then you would only be charging for the product that came out of that space, and vice versa. So it does have its pros and its cons. There is a fairly significant upfront cost to put these in. It is, as more and more of us are putting these outlets in, the cost is coming lower, and as anything new markets or new players come onto the market, that cost continues to come down. And some venues are doing this really, really well for incremental sales or servicing areas that you don't have the ability to put huge food and beverage outlets in. So this one that's on the screen, you have a look, it's very much your bag of lollies, your chocolate bars, and potentially a cold drink out of the fridge, and that works really, really well. When you start introducing things like burgers and hot chips and draft beer and the like, it comes a little bit trickier to manage. Not unachievable, but certainly a little bit trickier. And we're finding that the feedback from operators is that packaged product works best. So things that have the shelf life and that are pre-packed tend to work a little bit better. There's a couple of risks in the back end that you need to be aware of, that because when you tap your credit card on the way in, it's essentially taking a pre-authorization of your credit card or your payment device. And then if you leave and you don't have the funds on your payment device, that needs to be underwritten somewhere. So there is fail safes in play where there will be ongoing opportunities to charge cards afterwards, but we'll eventually get to a point where it might try a couple of times and it will stop trying. So the likelihood of people that don't have credit on their credit cards just tapping a machine and trying to control the system is probably pretty small. But there is, you do need to have the knowledge that you're going to be underwriting some part of that if there's an issue. What we're seeing in our world is that some punters love it and some punters hate it. So having a hybrid of traditional food and beverage outlets where you can engage with a customer, food and beverage staff can talk to a customer or help service them. And then there's an opportunity to have a grab and go where you can jump up from your seat, go and grab something, and get back to your seat super quick. That balance between the two is really, really important. And if you look at some of the new big venues overseas that are doing this really well, that's what they're doing. They've got a mix of, they're probably 80% traditional, 20% walk-in, walk-out technology, and that's somewhat based on the cost of fitting a store out. But also, I think having that serviceability, and as you say, there's no substitute for that human interaction. And food and beverage is no different. That if you're completely inactive with somebody in a venue, I'm not sure how much cut through you get. So it'll be really interesting to see these venues that are launched all full Frickness technology, how the punter, what their feedback is on not having any interaction with a point of sale person.
Thanks for that. That's very, very good insights into the pros and cons for this. And while we're talking about catering and so on, another technology that certainly seems to be taking or making some ground is the idea of waste management. And so being able to record food as it's getting thrown out in the kitchen, and showing then how much is getting wasted, to allow the chefs and the organization to perhaps change portion control and everything else they're doing. Is this something you've come across much at all, Dwane?
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of big production facilities and high volume outlets are certainly introducing this technology, and it's getting better and better at not only just weighing and understanding what your waste is, but actually itemizing. The technology is that good these days. It can recognize the difference between a meat pie and a bowl of pasta, and it will break down that data for you. And as businesses, as we're all environmentally conscious, as our supply networks are all environmentally conscious, having that data available to us, one, helps with our waste management and how we manage that in a venue, but also how we're communicating back to our teams and our hirers on what all those good news stories are. The Australian Defence Force at the moment is pushing the current food waste be cut by 50% across its entire network, which is fairly significant. And you're going to need some technology to help, one, quantify that number and also report it back, because if that's a target of your hire or your venue owner, if you're an operator, you've got to have the data that supports. You can't just say, oh yeah, well, we've reduced waste. How have you done that, and what data have you got to support your claim? But then as an operator, you want to understand, okay, what is it that we're throwing out every day? Is that we're throwing out kilos of pasta? Well, the consumer's not eating that, or are we throwing out more, white meat versus red meat? And obviously, there's cost of goods implications on all of those products. So I think the bigger the operation, the more prominent this technology is. Do I think we'll see it in small individual outlets or cafes? Potentially not, but certainly in our production facilities, or businesses that are doing production as a whole, it has a really big home for sure.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think the example of this picture actually is with IKEA. So they are obviously have a pretty major kitchen production too. And what about the good old topic that's been around for a long time now? It's in-seat ordering. We hear about it. We see, the concept sounds great. You can sit in your seat and you can order and have meals and food and drinks delivered to you. Is it happening?
It's happening. Is it happening well? That's probably the million-dollar question. And there's two things here. There's in-seat ordering, and then there's in-seat delivery. So to take a virtual queue or create a virtual queue and be able to order from your seat and then have push notification to go and collect it, definitely happening and working well. To take an order in your seat and have it delivered to your seat, I don't think it's happening well, or anybody's really nailed the process. And that's not because of lack of trying, want, or ability. It's more about venue design than anything. And if you look at, let's take in-seat ordering at the movies, for example, the gold class movie cinema is designed to allow food and beverage staff to get to each seat to service you. If you tried to give that same service ability in a normal cinema, it just wouldn't happen, because you've got a run of 20, 30 seats. You can't get to the 15th seat in a row. I experienced it in the US recently, where we were row or seats sort of 4 or 5 on the run, and the people to our right, who were seats 10 to 15, ordered a bunch of beers and popcorn and hot dogs, and we were forever just passing it down the line. And I think culturally that's probably acceptable in that market. I don't think that's accepted here in Australia. And, you're going to get the point where I've paid for a beer and, some wisecrack to my left of me decided to take a sip of it, or, sneezed on it, or spilt it, or dropped it, and, well, who's liable then? And so I don't think in-seat delivery is, unless it's designed for a specific location, has been done very well, or is happening well anywhere. But certainly in-seat ordering, click and collect, push notification, virtual queues, that has a huge space to play, and something that we should all be exploring. At the end of the day, punters come to the venue to watch the product that's on the court, whether it's a basketball game or a football game. or it's the movie that you're watching, the customer's paid a ticket to go and see the show, not necessarily to order your food and beverage. So to give them the ability to order, get a push notification to their phone, and they can quickly jump out of their seat, go and get it, and they're back in their seat within minutes, has huge benefit. And that you can also capitalize that where you say we're going to do it in certain sections. We're going to have, in reality, I would certainly suggest that you take ghost kitchens into consideration. There's no point having a food and beverage outlet on the concourse that is doing in-seat ordering, virtual queuing, because you've just moved the queue. You'll end up with two queues. You'll still have people coming to the belly up, and then people that are doing click and collect. And it's a bit like when you go to the fast pass at Disney World. If you're in that long queue, you're in that long queue, and then everybody just keeps running past, you're probably going to create the same product. There's the same problem. Whereas if you had an outlet that was either behind closed doors or was a ghost kitchen, virtual queuing, we can push notification you run and grab your product, and then the pass just runs like a normal food and beverage service area. If you're adamant in having in-seat delivery, I think the way the stadiums are designed at the moment, the logical option is to commercialize your two end seats on each seat run. So you're using the stairwell or the vomitory as your access point. You premierize those seats, maybe upsell them. You pay a little bit more to sit there knowing that some food and beverage person is going to deliver it to you. And then you don't have any of these delivery issues at seat 10, 12 or 15 in a run. And you can do that on most aisles if you plan it accordingly around a venue. But I think, we've got to be realistic. Servicing seat 14 in a run of 30 because they've ordered online is not going to be a great experience for the punter, and it's certainly not going to be a great experience for the operator, because it will be almost impossible to do it well.
So we're still a ways away from this being fully adopted, clearly, and I think how you explained and described that makes a ton of sense.
If you were to kill every second row of seats, and you had a virtual walkway or a walkway for the serviceability, or it was, you had two rows of seats and then a row in between so you can service the top and the bottom, then potentially, but you're killing an awful lot of seats. So unless you've got a stadium that's got a capacity, or you have an area where that you want to drive crowd to, so you might say it's only available in bay 200, and then we kill every second or third row in bay 200, and again we commercialize that some other way. I just think the way that we're currently designed, it is problematic.
Yeah, and I found this article interesting about the idea of taking that sort of ordering another step, where using Alexa and Siri and co, these AI assistants to be able to do ordering. And I've seen it actually in action at the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle, Washington, where in the corporate suites they're using Alexa now to do all the ordering in the suites, and just instead of having a staff member in every suite, they have a couple of staff members floating around making sure that it's all working okay, and doing it that way. So, and we'll talk more about AI here in a moment, but I think that's a good example of some of that pressure that's happening in that space too. But to keep things moving and changing topics again a little bit, I just wanted to touch on NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. Very, very technical description right there, which I won't read out to you. You can all read it. But when we talk about disruption and friend or foe to the industry, when the idea of NFTs first came out, I heard a lot of people talking about potentially this being a new way of doing ticketing, a more secure way, using the blockchain to stop the fraudulent tickets being sold and resold and so on. I haven't seen it yet where this has become mainstream. I think some people are using it for more for souvenirs and that sort of stuff. But Dwane, I don't know if you've seen anything with this as yet either.
It's not really my area of expertise or specialty, so I haven't really seen anything in play or come across it. Obviously, there's technology out there for preloading spend or digital dollars onto a ticket that you can use at a venue, and there's certainly the ability to take payment to a different mechanism away from your credit card, but the ability to have your credit card and payment terms on your phone is kind of negating some of that technology anyway.
Right. Yeah, I think it's one of those ones we may see more in the future, and but certainly not seeing a whole lot anywhere in the world just yet with that. So watch that space. Um, Facial recognition, another tech that's popping up a lot in our industry. The idea of having faces scanned. It's not a new idea. Certainly, we've seen it with the likes of NASCAR. Have been doing it at their venues for several years now, where they're using it for security reasons, and they've actually got it embedded into the big screens as you come in. The big screen showing the adverts and promos about the race drivers and everything else. But there's actually cameras in there that are scanning every single person coming into the venue, so they can then match against a database of known bad actors, if you like. Taylor Swift has been doing it for years with her stalking problem that she's had over the years. Same thing, scanning everybody coming into the venue and mapping that or matching that against the database of known people. Very, very, very particular and very detailed how this stuff works now, where it's scanning for the different emotions, for anger, contempt, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, surprise. Being able to predict, if someone's looking agitated, very important from a security perspective. But again, there's a whole lot of privacy issues that revolve around this sort of stuff as well. So just another one of those technologies, though, that I think we're seeing more and more starting to come into the venue world. Whether it becomes a friend or a foe, I think is yet to be determined. But certainly from a security standpoint and nothing else, it's certainly helping from that perspective. But the one I want to spend a little bit more time talking about now is big data. And Dwane, you touched on this before. You talked about making data decisions based on sales and different things. We all hear this a lot now, where venues and our own organizations are all talking about how we want to make data-driven decisions. Well, how do we do that? And are we actually doing that? I would challenge us that as an industry, we're not doing this very well. I don't think we're a great adopter of technology. We're certainly a bit behind most other industries when it comes to being at that leading edge or the bleeding edge. And there's pros and cons of that, of course, too. But when it comes to data, we are sitting on a ton of data in all the things that we do in our venues. And so what does that mean? And, what can we do with that? And I just want to give you a couple of quick examples of what data-driven decision-making means and this might apply to our industry. So there's a famous story around from Walmart about how they, several years ago, they matched up their loyalty program with their point of sale reconciliations each day. And, they come across several things that were pretty standard, like what you would expect, like people who bought gin also bought tonic and also bought lemons. Well, that makes sense. You don't need data to tell you that. That's probably pretty standard. You use your gut feel. But then there was a couple of other more interesting things came out, and this one in particular, the what they call the diapers, or what we call nappies, and beer, where on a Friday afternoon between 4 and 7 p.m. there was an unusually disproportionate amount of men in their mid-20s coming in, buying diapers or nappies and buying beer. And what they worked out was that a lot of these young fathers that were coming in were used to buying beer on a Friday, maybe going out with their buddies and having a few drinks and that. So they're a bit of a reminiscence and buying the beer just to maybe go home and change the baby and have a beer or two. So based on that data, Walmart decided to put the diapers or the nappies right next to the beer, and their sales skyrocketed because they put them where they're both convenient to find. So that was a good example of using data to actually make a good, solid business decision. Another example, which is not our industry, but I think it's good to understand and really important as we talk about technology. We can learn, because I believe we're not an early adopter, we can learn from other industries when it comes to what works and what doesn't when it comes to technology. So UPS, I don't know if a lot of you know this, but UPS did an awful lot of data analysis, and they decided that their trucks will only ever turn right. And so the idea was, if the trucks only turn right, of course, where that makes sense. There is occasions where they can turn left, but and I'm talking about the US particularly, where they're driving on the right hand side of the road, and so it was a shorter corner to turn on. There was less accidents because you weren't turning in front of traffic or crossing traffic. And by doing this in 1 year, they were saving about 2.4 million miles, which you can imagine what that equates to in gas prices. So using data to then show, to be more efficient. And the final one I'll share with you, which is totally irrelevant, but I thought was fascinating anyway, because it was all to do with sharks. And there was a study done from some students at a university in the States on the correlation of the number of sharks in a movie versus a success. And they came up with a model that if you had between 2 and 3 sharks in your movie, that was a success. If you had any less sharks, it wasn't as good. If you had any more sharks, it wasn't as good. So there you go for all those budding cinematographers out there. If you're going to put sharks in the movie, 2 to 3 is the optimum number if you want to make a good movie. Again, irrelevant, but I want to bring that back to our industry. And Dwane, you talk a lot about data. So comments, thoughts on making data-driven decisions.
I mean, if you're not making data-driven decisions these days, you're probably not managing your business the way you should. The issue that I think we have as an industry is we have an awful lot of data and we're not using all of it. We tend to look at the top talking points of, what's the arrival pattern, what's the spend per head, what's the dwell time. They're probably 3 key areas that we all talk about on a weekly basis. And I know within our business where, all right, what's the forecasted spend per head? And that's the metric. When you start talking to your supply chain network, data is super, super important to drive those decisions on, where we're investing our time and energy on supply rights, or how we're leveraging our partnership with suppliers specifically, going into buying patterns on weekdays versus weekends, kickoff times, or the start event time, what time the concert's on, what time the play starts, demographic, where people are coming from, travel data. If you start looking at where people are traveling from and they're traveling longer distances, generally speaking, they'll arrive earlier, which gives you the ability to, certainly cater and look after them because they're nervous about, being late for the show or late for the event. Whereas attendees are a little closer to the venue, probably leave it a little bit closer to kickoff time, so to speak. But you really got to delve into that data and into the next level, even going down into, point of sale, speed of service, how long the transaction's taking, all of those, because we deal in such large volumes. If you're able to understand your data and you can increase the speed of service by, even if it's 4 or 5 seconds a transaction, and you're doing that on 80, 90,000 transactions a day on a sold out grand final day, it makes a big difference. And then being able to give that data back to your suppliers, your supply network, your interested parties in your business is super key. So, yeah, I think we do really well at gathering data, and we probably scrape the surface of understanding the top tier of it, and we can certainly go a little bit deeper and understand some more of those buying habits. And I think when we start to match the point of sale with the end user and membership programs and understanding demographic buying patterns, that's where you're really going to get some benefit.
Yeah, totally. And it's a great segue into this next slide I've got here, where Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas, are using data now to do exactly what you were talking about, being able to see real time what's going on in the building. Where are the lines the biggest or the shortest? Where are what are they selling the most of in different concessions? All that sort of stuff, so they can make real time decisions and make sure that the customer, the attendee, is getting the best experience possible. Same with IndyCar, the what they call the Brickyard, turning it into a smart city where they can make these decisions on what's going on and when and how and where, by looking at the data as it's coming in from point of sale, as it's coming in from all the different outlets and different areas. So I think the commonality here is that we really need to make sure we are using data. We are a notoriously or notorious industry of making gut feel decisions, and there's nothing wrong with gut feel decisions, especially when people have been around a long time and their guts going to make some pretty good decisions. But let's back that up with data. And that's something where I think, here at Momentus, we can help a lot with. We're very fortunate to have many of the venues around the world that are using our system. So we want to try to, a big initiative I'm trying to push forward is how can we help and work with the associations, as an example, to be able to help with benchmarking and looking at how do you compare to your peers when it comes to per cap spends, when it comes to space utilization, when it comes to economic impact, all these sort of things. If we can, utilize that data, anonymize it, and sanitize it so that no one's sharing proprietary information, but use that for the better of the industry. That's something I'm continuing to push. But I want to finish up on artificial intelligence. We all hear about AI, and I mean, gosh, it's here to stay, no question. Once again, are we the early adopters of this? No, we're not. Our industry is not. But what does it mean? And so how can we think about this when it comes to our industry? So the artificial intelligence covers all these 4 different areas you see, or there's an example of 4 different areas here. But to give you an example of that, when we talk about natural language processing, think of this, or natural language queries, NLQs, same sort of thing. Think of this as, imagine, you want to get a report on your forecasting for whether it's whatever it may be, food and beverage sales, whether it's bookings, et cetera, doesn't matter. But right now, to do that, you've got to go and pull a report from a system. Imagine if you could just use a natural language query. In other words, I could say to my computer, please give me a report that shows me all the sales from these 3 locations for the last 6 months, and I want to know, I want to see that compared to the 6 months prior. That's a natural language query. You talk to the computer, and that spits that out for you. No more report writing. No more having to go and have someone, hey, can you go and write me a report for this? Or go to your suppliers. Can you write me a report for that? And it takes 3 months and costs you thousands of dollars. No, this is where artificial intelligence can really help us as an industry. There's many other things with that too. We've all heard of ChatGPT and the different engines like this. There's Microsoft Copilot. There's tons of them out there. So Gemini, all these different things that are becoming commonplace now. But how do they apply to us? And the reason is, or the ways that it is, like I just mentioned, with natural language queries. With imagine being able to have artificial intelligence look at your bookings and say, of all the bookings you're forecasting for the next 6 months, here's the ones you should be focused on, because they're the ones that are going to either A, make you the most revenue, or B, be the most strategic ones that you need to have, or C, there's several little ones you could have that would give you better yield than if you chose 1 or 2 of the bigger ones and had lots of gaps in between. So this is the sort of stuff where artificial intelligence will help us. And I could go on because it's a bit of a soapbox topic for me, but I'm mindful of time here. And Dwane, have you got anything on to add to that?
I think the AI help for us as particularly operators in venue. I mean, our job is to operate a venue, and we all want to be out on the floor and with our teams and trying to understand our business. I mean, if you look at ChatGPT, it's a great system that'll also help you for things that you don't know. If you're not an expert in, IR, or you're not an understanding of a legal query, you've got the ability to use AI to help you do things or give you the framework as a starting point. I wouldn't be suggesting you ask ChatGPT to write your policy for something, but it might be able to go and do the research for you to give you the starting points to write your policy, or give you the framework to write the policy, so that you're not wasting time doing, tasks that are stopping you from getting out on the floor and being the operators that we want to be. So it's a little bit of horses for courses, but as somebody who, obviously, when I was younger, had learning difficulties. I mean, this stuff has, huge impact on our young people coming into the workforce. And we have a lot of people that join our industry because they are great thinkers and lateral thinkers and think on their feet. They might not be academics. And AI is going to be able to help them go to the next level. And whether that's understanding documents or creating documents or even helping rewrite an email for a professional response because you're struggling with it, it does have a place. And if you use it correctly, it can be really beneficial to individuals and users.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you raised a really good point there. The big caveat of don't use some of these things verbatim and expect that what it spits out is 100% accurate, because often it's not. By all means, use it as a guide, and also be very aware that if you're not using a paid subscription and have made a specific request to have your data kept private, all of this data goes into the public domain. So if you're putting proprietary sales information or venue information in there, that's going to be out there in the domain if you're just throwing it into the free to use versions of this sort of stuff. I think, again, we're at the early days of this. I think we're going to see other industries really come to the fore with adopting some of this AI, and then we'll find what's going to suit us best, and that'll become something that we'll get really into in years to come. But Joel gave a bit of a plug before for the venue management school. I'm going to do the same, because in the technology class we do dive a bit deeper into this sort of stuff, and we'll do some real world examples of what this can mean to a venue. The final thought, though, before we jump to questions: technology is great. It's a wonderful thing. We have to be mindful of two things. One, we shouldn't be adopting every single thing that comes out because it sounds like it's the sexiest, newest, greatest thing. Be aware of what you want to achieve before you just go and adopt a technology. They're very disruptive, and we've got to be mindful of, just like anything we do, of what our end goal is, and then methodically work our way back from that. But importantly, the whole topic of this session was friend or foe. Technology is, in general, it needs to be our friend. If we treat it as a foe, we run a very real risk of going the way of organizations and industries that looked at technology as a foe. Look at the taxi industry. Look at the big box stores. Look at media outlets and so on, and the hotel industry all got disrupted by technology coming in, with the likes of Uber and Amazon and Airbnb and Facebook and so on. So embrace it for what it is. It can be a very, very important part of what we do, but we have to be very careful and very specific in the ways that we want to use it. With that, we will stop and now pause for questions. Joel, was there anything coming to the Q&A while we've been talking?
Thanks, Steve. We have one question that's come through, so we'll run with that, and then I might use some time to sum up the session as I've experienced it. So the question that we've got is, hey, Dwane, Helen Fairclough, VMA Board Director here. We were discussing the topic of just walk out tech at the MCG VMA after 5 a couple of weeks ago, and the topic of business case came up. How do you best justify the upfront cost investment? What's the ROI?
It's a hand grenade question, that one, because it largely depends on what you're building. Now, if you're going to go and build an Amazon store that has 15 or 20 SKUs in it, it needs specific hot holds because you want to do a hot hold product. It has a grab and go piece. It has a fridge for beverages in it, and it's a fairly large store, so you want to have huge volume go through it. It's going to cost you. It could cost you in excess of $1 million and a bit to set it up. And obviously the ROI, that's really, really difficult, and it's a bit hard to stack up, which is why the early investments for Amazon, I think, were mostly funded by Amazon to get the technology out there, and they kind of underwrote it. If you're looking at a smaller store that's more grab and go, whether it's just beverages or it's just impulse buying, so chips, Mars bars, and the like, it's significantly less in investment. And the ROI on that's really good, because what you're doing is you're doing incremental sales, so it's additional sales, you're not cannibalizing normal sales. And then you're doing that incremental sales without any or very little labor on the overhead. So it's a little bit of horses for courses. I think if you're looking for a case study that does it really well, I would go and have a look at Allegiant in Vegas. They have a good mix. They've got some very small walk-in and walk-out stores that are doing great volumes. The return on those investments, they're saying, are within 14 to 18 months. And for a venue that the technology will last 3 to 5 years without updating, the hardware specific stuff. The ROI on that's pretty good.
Steve, do you have any other final comments on that specific point?
Yeah, it's interesting. Living in the States, it's obviously it's being adopted a lot faster over there than perhaps out here. I was at a major league soccer stadium recently, and they'd built the stadium a few years back, and they put one of the just walk out stores in. And when I was there a few weeks ago, they were putting another 3 in place. So they clearly saw a good ROI on that, even though there's hundreds of thousands of dollars investment in putting three of those stores in. They saw enough ROI to warrant doing that. So again, but it's horses for courses. It depends on what who you are and what you're trying to do and what your audience is like.
You've also got to look at volume, right? When you look at these things, that if you've got a very large caterer in the US that is running 15 baseball stadiums, and each baseball stadium's north of $100 million in revenue just in catering alone, they're doing deals with these technology partners that make it far more cost effective for them purely because of volume and who they are in the industry. If you look at, the size of our market, our catering budgets, or how much we're putting through, we don't have the usage that the US does. A baseball stadium is doing in excess of 85 home season games a year, let alone concerts and other content. If you're looking at a football stadium that is a one-team town, it might only do 14 events a year. So their return on investment is a lot harder to do in our market because of our content is very, very different. So just bear that in mind, that we're not, comparing apples with apples a little bit. You look at Dodgers that's doing, 125 million US dollars and well over 100 events a year. It's the ROI, and that's much better than, doing 40 event days in one of our major stadiums here in Australia with probably a third of the crowd attendees and spend per head.
Great. Thank you very much, guys. I might just use a few minutes just to wrap up what I took away from that session as food for thought. One of them is that if we go back to the origins of technology, the first human technology was fire, and fire can cook your meat, but it can burn your house down and kill your family. So, wisdom is kind of the key piece that's missing here in terms of being judicious and thoughtful about the role of technology in your organization and how we use it. And certainly what Steve was saying before about ChatGPT is really important, that, we are both being open to the possibilities of technology, but not blindly adopting them in a thoughtless kind of way that can kind of backfire on you. The second thing that really jumped out at me is that, the really smart ways of bridging that gap between technology and customer experience is to really focus on the physical realities of the real world and also on what we know about human emotions and intelligence. So blindly implementing a technology because it's the flavor of the month isn't necessarily going to help your venue if those things don't gel with the way people really want to interact with events particularly. So we looked before at a slide of 3 people seated at a conference and then 3 people on a Zoom screen, and every single person on this webinar would have an intuitive, so apologies for those lights going off, would have an intuitive feeling of which of those 2 interactions with human beings is more rewarding. So again, just really thinking for yourself as the customer, would I like to have this experience, or am I just implementing this because it's a sort of technological flavor of the month? Certainly a lot of the examples that have been brought up today about, taking food without paying immediately for it or implementing AI, we are in the womb when it comes to human technology relationships, and it's all a big experiment that we're part of, which is incredibly exciting, but also requires a level of patience and open-mindedness to engage with. So technology adoption is as much about mindset as it is sort of technological and technical prowess. And certainly that discussion around technology and mindset and change management and the people impacts of technology change is certainly something that's on my mind a lot when it comes to Congress and school in future, because that's going to be increasingly important to the success of venues, both at the sort of workforce development end, but also at the end as it applies to our customers. Steve, you talked about NFTs and ticketing. There's an example that everyone should look at that's really interesting, that's making waves in the Netherlands. There's a company called Get Protocol, GET, who are partnering with most of the major arenas in Amsterdam now, and their solution is really strong. They are looking to enter the Australian market, but they don't have an Amazon web server in region at the moment and haven't made that move yet. But I've used their product and it's pretty robust in terms of fraud protection, but also in terms of fan engagement. So in terms of kind of the perks that fans can have attributed to their digital identity as they relate to their tickets. So I'd really encourage you to check that out. And then probably the final bit of wisdom that I took from it when Steve and Dwane were talking about data is that, you know, information isn't knowledge and it's not wisdom either. So that judiciousness of not getting lost in the saturation of data and really figuring out what's meaningful is the really key thing that we all need to do. And look, that's where our knowledge as experts in venue management comes in. And that's where knowledge of the business is always going to be really important to data-driven decisions. So we can't outsource that to business analysts and we can't outsource it fully to AI. We've got to use our own human intelligence and experience to pass that information. And you know, conversations like this between people who really care and about our industry and love it are going to be really central to advancing all of our competency in this space. So I really, again, thank you, Steve and Dwane, for your time today. Thank you, everyone who's joined. Thanks, Helen, for asking those questions. For many of us, the next time we'll all catch up is the Venue Management School and Leadership Institute. So for the third time today, I'll bring that up as a really amazing experience for people to get deeper into subjects like this and to make lifelong connections that can take you places in your career that you haven't dreamt of. So look forward to seeing you there in November in Kingscliff, and we'll see you again on the next digital series.